When my husband's best friend crossed the line, my world turned upside down. Betrayal, secrets, and a race against time. What would you do? Welcome to Echoes of the Past. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more gripping stories. Life was finally perfect. Sarah and I had been through our share of struggles, money problems in the early years, long hours at work that kept us apart, moments when we wondered if we were even meant to be together. But we made it. We fought for our love, and now, standing on the other side of it all, we were finally happy, truly happy. We had just moved into our dream home, a cozy house with a big porch where we'd drink coffee in the mornings. We had vacations planned, Paris in the spring, a road trip through California in the summer. We even talked about starting a family, something that once felt so far away, but now seemed like the natural next step. I would catch myself smiling for no reason. I'd wake up in the morning and see Sarah curled up next to me, and I'd think, this is it. This is the life I always wanted. Then everything changed. At first it was small things, fatigue that never went away, bruises appearing too easily, headaches that made it hard to focus. I brushed it off. I told myself I was just tired, that work had been stressful. But Sarah noticed. She always noticed. You should see a doctor, she said one evening as we sat on the couch, her head resting on my shoulder. You've been acting different. I kissed the top of her head and laughed it off. I'm fine. Probably just need a vacation. She didn't look convinced. Then let's go. Let's take a trip next month. Somewhere warm. I smiled, pretending that sounded like a real possibility. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. A week later, I went to the doctor, just to be sure, just to ease Sarah's worry. I never expected to walk out of that office with a death sentence. We need to discuss your test results, Dr. Mitchell said, his voice steady but careful. My heart pounded. Okay. He hesitated, and in that hesitation, I knew. I knew. Andrew, he said, you have cancer. The words felt like they belonged to someone else. I blinked at him, waiting for him to laugh, to tell me it was a mistake, that he had the wrong file. But he didn't. It was real. It was happening. I was dying. He kept talking, something about stages, treatment options, survival rates, but I barely heard him. My mind was elsewhere, spinning through all the things I was about to lose. Sarah, our home, the future we had built together, our plans, our beautiful plans, meant nothing now. By the time I got to my car, my hands were shaking. The world outside still moved as if nothing had changed. People walked past, talking, laughing, living their lives. But my life was over, and now I had to tell Sarah. I pulled out my phone, staring at her name on the screen. My thumb hovered over the call button, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't destroy our happiness, not yet. So I made a decision. I would keep this secret. I would make every moment count, make her the happiest she had ever been. I would make sure her last memories of me were filled with love and laughter, not sickness, not death. For her, I would pretend. That night, I lay in bed next to Sarah, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. I turned on my side, just watching her, memorizing the way the dim light from the street lamp outside traced the curve of her cheek. She looked so peaceful, so unaware that our perfect life had just been shattered. I wanted to freeze this moment. I wanted to stay here forever, in this bed, in this life, where everything was still normal, where I wasn't sick, where the future was still ours. But I knew the truth, and soon she would too. Unless I didn't tell her. The thought came suddenly, a quiet whisper in the back of my mind. At first, I tried to push it away. It wasn't fair, was it? To keep something like this from her? She was my wife. She had the right to know. But then I imagined it, the way her face would crumble, the way her laughter would disappear, The way our last months together would be filled with hospital visits, medical charts, and the slow, inevitable countdown to goodbye. I couldn't do that to her. I wouldn't. Instead, I would give her the best months of our lives. I would fill them with joy, with adventure, with love. I would make sure she never saw me as a dying man. She would only see the man she fell in love with. So I made my decision. I would pretend. The next morning, I woke up before her and made breakfast. Pancakes, eggs, coffee, the works. She walked into the kitchen, still in her pajamas, her hair messy from sleep, and smiled. "Well, this is a surprise," she said, stretching. "What's the occasion?" I grinned. "Just wanted to do something nice for my beautiful wife." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you feeling okay?" I almost laughed. If only she knew. Never better. She kissed my cheek before sitting down, and as we ate, I told her something that had been on my mind for a while. "Let's take that trip," I said. She looked up. "What trip?" "You mentioned going somewhere warm. Let's do it. Let's go next week." She blinked, surprised. "Next week? What about work?" I shrugged. "Work can wait." She studied me for a moment, as if trying to figure out what had gotten into me. "Are you serious?" she asked. "Completely." A slow smile spread across her face. "Okay, let's do it." She grabbed her phone and started looking up flights, and for the first time since my diagnosis, I felt like I could breathe again. This was how I wanted her to remember me. Spontaneous, full of life, not weak, not sick. The next few weeks became a blur of carefully planned happiness. We booked the trip to Santorini, a place Sarah had always dreamed of visiting. I surprised her with little things: a handwritten love note tucked into her purse, a bouquet of her favorite flowers waiting for her after work, a candlelit dinner on the balcony. I made love to her more often, held her longer, kissed her deeper, and she noticed. "You're different," she said one evening, lying next to me, tracing circles on my chest with her fingertips. I swallowed. "Different how?" She propped herself up on one elbow, studying me. "I don't know. You're more present, more affectionate. Not that I'm complaining." She smiled. "I like it." I smiled back, but my heart ached. She had no idea that I was clinging to every second, trying to carve these moments into my memory before they were taken from me. She had no idea that I was racing against time, but no matter how carefully I hid it, I knew the truth would catch up to me eventually. And when it did, I could only hope she would forgive me. Keeping a secret like this should have been impossible. Sarah knew me better than anyone. She could read me like an open book, pick up on every shift in my mood, every flicker of hesitation in my voice, and yet, somehow, I managed to convince her that nothing had changed. I became an actor in my own life. Every morning I woke up and put on a smile, kissed her like it was just another ordinary day, and pretended that I wasn't counting how many of those days I had left. Some moments were easy, when we were laughing over breakfast, when we walked through the city holding hands, when she rested her head on my chest at night and told me how happy she was. Other moments felt like torture, when I caught my reflection in the mirror and saw the exhaustion in my own eyes, when I had to swallow back the pain, when the weight of what I was hiding became almost unbearable. But I pushed through. I had to. The trip to Santorini was everything I wanted it to be. Sarah fell in love with the island instantly: the whitewashed houses, the deep blue sea, the way the sunset painted the sky in colors so beautiful they didn't even look real. On our second evening there, we had dinner at a restaurant on a cliffside, the warm breeze carrying the scent of salt and wine. Sarah sat across from me, glowing in the candlelight, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "This is perfect," she sighed. "I never want to leave." I smiled, squeezing her hand. "Then let's stay forever," I joked. She laughed. "Don't tempt me." She had no idea how much I meant it. I wanted to freeze this moment, to make it last forever, to forget that somewhere inside me, my body was betraying me. For a little while, I almost managed to. But the thing about cancer is that it doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't wait. and eventually it made itself known. It started with small things: a wave of dizziness that hit me as we walked along the beach, a sharp pain in my side when I stood up too quickly, a sudden weakness that made me grip the table to keep from swaying. I brushed it off every time. "I'm just tired," I'd say. "Must be the heat." Sarah believed me. Why wouldn't she? But my body was starting to betray me in ways I couldn't hide. One morning I woke up to find her sitting on the edge of the bed, watching me with a frown. "You're pale," she said, "and you barely touched your food last night." I forced a smile. "I think I just need more sleep." She didn't look convinced. A few days later I caught her watching me again, her brows knitted together in concern. And then, the worst moment of all, we were walking through a small market, hand in hand, when the world suddenly tilted. My vision blurred, my legs gave out, and before I knew it, I was on my knees, gasping for breath. Sarah was at my side in an instant. "Andrew, Andrew, what's wrong?" I forced myself to smile through the nausea, through the panic in her voice. "Guess I stood up too fast," I muttered. "I'm fine." But I wasn't fine, and for the first time I saw the fear in her eyes. I knew then that my secret wouldn't last much longer. Sarah was smart, she was observant, and soon she was going to realize that something was very, very wrong. When we returned home from Santorini, I thought I could go back to pretending, that the trip had been a small slip, that I could still keep this hidden for a little longer. But I had underestimated Sarah. She had seen too much. She didn't press me right away, but I could feel it. Her eyes on me when she thought I wasn't looking, the way she hesitated before asking if I was okay. She had always been intuitive, always able to sense when something was off. And now, she was watching, waiting. One evening, she found me sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. She sat down beside me, curling her legs underneath her. "You've been different," she said softly. "Since the trip." I forced a laugh. "In a good way, I hope." She didn't smile. "In a way that scares me." My stomach twisted. "Sarah, I'm fine," I said, reaching for her hand. "I promise." She studied me for a long moment, her fingers laced with mine. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "But I know you, and I know when you're lying." I swallowed, keeping my expression as steady as I could. I've been thinking a lot. About life. About us." I smiled, squeezing her hand. "That's why I wanted to take that trip. I don't want us to waste time. I want to enjoy every second we have together." She exhaled, leaning her head against my shoulder. "I love that. I love you. I just, I need you to be honest with me." I pressed a kiss to her hair, closing my eyes. I was being honest, just not in the way she thought. The sickness was getting harder to hide. I started taking naps during the day, something I had never done before. I lost weight, my clothes hanging just a little looser than before. Some mornings, I woke up with a pain in my chest so sharp that I had to bite my lip to keep from gasping. Sarah noticed it all. She didn't say anything right away, but I could feel her tension growing. The cautious way she watched me, the way she started cooking more, making sure I ate. She was preparing for something, and so was I. One afternoon, I was sitting at my desk, going through old photos of us on my laptop. Santorini, our first apartment, our wedding day. I should have been doing something else, writing letters for her to find later, organizing things so she wouldn't have to, but I couldn't bring myself to move past these moments. This was our life, our story, and soon I wouldn't be here to tell it. I heard Sarah come home. The door closed, keys jingled in the bowl by the entrance. Then, silence. A long, heavy silence. Something was wrong. I turned, and my heart stopped. She was standing in the doorway, holding something in her hands. A folded piece of paper. My stomach dropped. "What's that?" I asked, my voice too calm. She lifted it, her fingers trembling. "A hospital bill." "Shit," I had been so careful. I had hidden everything: documents, prescriptions, even the calendar reminders for my doctor's appointments. But somehow, something had slipped through the cracks. Sarah's face was pale, her eyes wide. She was terrified. "Andrew," she whispered, stepping closer, "why is there a hospital bill with your name on it?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. This was it. The lie was crumbling, and I had run out of time. I had spent months preparing for this moment, or maybe preparing wasn't the right word. I had spent months avoiding it, convincing myself that if I just smiled wide enough, kissed her long enough, and filled our days with enough love, I could somehow rewrite reality. But reality had sharp edges, and now it was cutting through the illusion I had built. Sarah stood there, gripping the hospital bill like it was the last solid thing in a world suddenly spinning out of control. "Andrew," she said again, her voice cracking, "tell me the truth." I could have lied. One last time. Told her it was a mistake, a mix-up, that I had taken some routine tests and forgotten to mention it, but I was so damn tired of lying. I took a slow breath. "Sit down," I said softly. She shook her head. "Number, just say it." My chest tightened. "I have cancer." The words hung in the air between us, heavier than anything I had ever spoken. Sarah's breath hitched. She blinked, as if trying to process the sentence, but it wouldn't fit. It didn't belong. Finally, she let out a sharp, shaky laugh. "No." She shook her head violently. "No, you don't. Sarah, you don't have cancer," she screamed, her voice breaking as tears streamed down her face. "You can't. That's not real." I wanted to go to her, to hold her, to make it better, but there was no making this better. "I'm sorry," I whispered. She took a step back, pressing a hand to her mouth. Her whole body was trembling. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I hesitated. "How long, Andrew?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "They gave me 6 months." Her breath left her in a ragged sob, and then silence. Sarah didn't speak for a long time. She just sat there on the couch, staring at the floor, her hands clasped tightly together. I sat across from her, waiting, knowing there was nothing I could say to make this hurt any less. Finally, she lifted her head. Her eyes were red and swollen, but there was something else in them now, something sharper than grief. "How could you?" I flinched. "Sarah, how could you hide this from me?" Her voice was hoarse, filled with betrayal. "Do you have any idea what it feels like to find out this way?" She threw the hospital bill onto the coffee table. "Like I'm some stranger who doesn't deserve to know what's happening to her own husband?" Guilt burned through me. "I didn't want to hurt you," I said quietly. She let out a hollow laugh. "Well, congratulations. You failed." The words cut deeper than I expected. Tears welled in my eyes, but I forced them back. I wanted to give us good memories. I wanted to protect you from this, from the hospitals and the waiting and the fear. I didn't want our last months to be filled with— "Our last months?" she interrupted. I hesitated. Her expression crumbled. "Oh my God, you weren't even going to tell me, were you?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. "You were just going to die and let me figure it out after?" Her voice cracked. "Did you really think that was better?" I had, and now I saw how wrong I had been. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I need to think," she whispered. I can't do this right now." Then she stood up, grabbed her coat, and walked out the door. And I was alone. Sarah didn't come home that night. I lay awake in our bed, staring at the ceiling, listening for the sound of the front door. But it never came. I didn't blame her. She needed time. Time to grieve, to process, to decide if she could forgive me for what I had done. And I wouldn't rush her. The next morning, she was back. She stood in the doorway of our bedroom, her eyes red but determined. "I'm angry at you," she said quietly. "I don't know if I'll ever not be angry." I nodded, sitting up. "I know." She took a slow breath. "But I don't want to waste the time we have left being mad at you." A lump rose in my throat. "Sarah." She walked over, sat on the bed beside me, and took my hand. "You don't get to protect me from this," she whispered. "If you're going through it, I'm going through it too." And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. We didn't talk about death after that, not in the way people might expect. There were no dramatic hospital scenes, no whispered goodbyes in sterile white rooms. Instead, there were mornings spent wrapped in each other's arms, afternoons filled with laughter, and nights where we held on to each other as if we could stop time. We traveled. Not far, not like Santorini, but enough. A road trip up the coast, stopping at every little diner and antique shop we could find. A weekend in the mountains, where we sat by the fire drinking wine and pretending the rest of the world didn't exist. We lived, even as my body grew weaker, even as the pain became harder to hide. Sarah never left my side. She held my hand through the worst of it, wiped my tears when I couldn't hold them back anymore, and kissed my forehead when the weight of everything became too much. She never let me feel like a dying man. She made me feel like her husband. And that was all I had ever wanted. In the final weeks, when walking became too difficult, and even sitting up drained my energy, I started writing. Letters. One for Sarah, to read when she was ready. One for each of the birthdays I wouldn't be there for. One for the first Christmas without me. One for the day she found love again. Because she would find love again. And when that day came, I needed her to know that it was okay. That I wanted her to be happy. That she didn't owe me her grief. She found the letters after I was gone. I hope they helped. I don't know what happens after death. But if there's anything at all beyond this life, I hope it looks something like the days I spent with Sarah. Because even in the face of death, I was the luckiest man in the world, and I wouldn't have changed a thing. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment.